So, this is probably one of the weirdest and most infuriating things I've ever had to deal with, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I don't even know if I'm looking for advice or just a place to vent because my emotions are all over the place. I 28F grew up in a household where pets were basically considered unnecessary annoyances. My dad 57M always made it clear that he didn't like animals, especially dogs. He would go on rants about how they were dirty, loud, and pointless. My mom 54F and I wanted a dog when I was younger, but he would shut it down immediately. When I moved out at 22, the first thing I did after settling into my new apartment was adopt a dog. Enter Daisy, my little ray of sunshine. Daisy is a rescue mix, a small breed with the sweetest personality. She's my best friend, my hiking buddy, and honestly, one of the most important parts of my life. For a while, everything was fine. I kept my distance from my parents' house because I knew my dad wouldn't want Daisy around. My mom would occasionally visit me at my place, and she adored Daisy. But my dad? He wouldn't even acknowledge her existence. Things came to a head a few months ago when my mom had a health scare. She had to have surgery, and I offered to stay at their house to help take care of her while she recovered. My dad grumbled about it, but I insisted that Daisy had to come with me. She's part of my family, and there was no way I was leaving her alone for weeks. At first, my dad tolerated Daisy in the house, but barely. He wouldn't look at her, wouldn't pet her, and would mutter under his breath whenever she walked by. Stupid mutt and filthy animal were his favorite go-to phrases. I tried to ignore it for the sake of keeping the peace, but it was clear he was getting more annoyed by the day. Then one morning, Daisy was gone. At first, I thought maybe she'd somehow gotten out. I searched the house, the yard, and the neighborhood, calling her name and asking neighbors if they'd seen her. Nothing. I was panicked. Daisy had never run off before, and she's usually glued to my side. I even put up posters and called local shelters, hoping someone had found her. I was on the verge of tears when my mom pulled me aside later that day. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure how to tell me what she knew. That's when she dropped the bomb. My dad had taken Daisy. Apparently, my dad had been ranting to my mom about how that dog is ruining my house and how he couldn't take it anymore. He told her he was handling the problem but didn't give her any details. My mom was horrified but didn't know how to stop him. She thought maybe he'd just let Daisy out somewhere, which was already bad enough. But what she didn't realize was that he had taken her and driven her to a rural area miles away from the house. I was absolutely livid. I confronted my dad as soon as he walked in the door that evening. I demanded to know where Daisy was and how he could do something so cruel. At first, he tried to act like he had no idea what I was talking about. But when I mentioned that Mom had told me everything, he finally admitted it. After leaving my parents' house, I realized that this was not just about the act of abandoning Daisy. It was a breaking point for years of unresolved tension between my dad and me. His disdain for dogs was just a symptom of something much bigger. His need to control everything around him and his inability to see anything from someone else's perspective. I stayed with my friend Sarah for about a week after the incident. Sarah had always been one of those people who treated Daisy like royalty, so Daisy was thrilled to be there. Sarah cooked Daisy special meals, gave her belly rubs, and even set up a cozy little spot on her couch for her to sleep. Having Sarah's support during that time meant the world to me, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I needed a fresh start, somewhere my dad's toxic presence couldn't reach me. So, I began looking for apartments in a neighboring city far enough away to feel like a clean break, but close enough that my mom could visit if she wanted to. Finding a new place was more challenging than I expected. Many landlords had strict no-pet policies, and the ones who allowed pets often charged exorbitant fees. I started to feel defeated, but then I came across an ad for a small house on the outskirts of the city. The rent was reasonable, and the owner specifically mentioned that the property was pet-friendly. I called immediately and arranged a viewing. When I saw the house, I knew it was perfect. It wasn't anything fancy, a small, one-bedroom bungalow with a tiny yard, but it felt like home. The owner, a kind older woman named Margaret, was a retired vet who immediately took a liking to Daisy. "She's got such a sweet face," Margaret said, scratching Daisy behind the ears. You're lucky to have her. I moved in within a week, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Meanwhile, the legal situation with my dad continued to unfold. The charges of animal cruelty and theft had to go through the courts, and while I wanted to focus on rebuilding my life, I couldn't escape the drama. My dad's lawyer tried to downplay what he had done, arguing that abandoning a dog isn't the same as harming one. I couldn't believe it. How could anyone minimize what he had done? Daisy could have died out there. She could have starved, been attacked by a wild animal, or been hit by a car. The emotional toll it took on me was immense, and I was determined to make sure my dad faced the consequences of his actions. The prosecutor handling the case assured me they would do everything possible to hold him accountable. I provided a detailed statement, photos of Daisy before and after the incident, and even had a vet testify about the potential dangers Daisy had faced being left alone in the woods. Despite the evidence, the trial was emotionally exhausting. My dad showed no remorse throughout the proceedings. He sat there with his arms crossed, rolling his eyes whenever my lawyer spoke. At one point he even muttered, "This is ridiculous," loud enough for the judge to hear. The verdict was bittersweet. My dad was found guilty and sentenced to community service and a small fine. It wasn't the justice I had hoped for, but it was something. More importantly, it sent a message that his actions were not okay. The trial caused a massive rift in my family. My mom was torn between supporting me and standing by my dad, who refused to acknowledge that he had done anything wrong. She called me multiple times, asking if there was any way I could forgive and forget. "You know how your father is," she said during one particularly frustrating phone call. "He didn't mean any harm. He just has his way of doing things." "His way of doing things?" I snapped. "His way of doing things almost killed Daisy, Mom. I can't just pretend that didn't happen." Some of my extended family members took my dad's side, accusing me of being too dramatic and ungrateful. They said I should be thankful for everything my dad had done for me growing up and that I was overreacting by cutting him out of my life. But there were others who stood firmly by me. My aunt, my dad's sister, called me after the trial to say she was proud of me for standing up for Daisy. "Your dad's always been stubborn," she said. But this was crossing a line. As the months went by, I poured all my energy into creating a safe, happy life for Daisy and me. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, inspired by what Daisy had been through. Helping other rescue dogs find loving homes was incredibly rewarding, and it gave me a sense of purpose during a time when I felt like I was still picking up the pieces of my life. I also began therapy, something I probably should have done years ago. Talking to a professional helped me unpack not just the incident with Daisy, but the years of emotional baggage I carried from growing up with my dad. For so long, I had accepted his controlling, dismissive behavior as just the way he is, but therapy helped me see that I deserved better. Daisy thrived in our new home. She loved the little yard, where she spent her afternoons lounging in the sun or chasing squirrels. I started taking her to a nearby dog park, where we made a whole new group of friends, both human and canine. One of the biggest lessons I learned from this experience is that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people and pets who love you unconditionally, who stand by you no matter what. Daisy is my family. Sarah is my family. The friends I've made at the shelter are my family. And as painful as it was to let go of the relationship I had with my dad, I've come to terms with the fact that some relationships just aren't worth holding onto. It's been over a year since everything happened, and while the pain and anger haven't completely disappeared, I'm in a much better place now. Daisy and I are happy, healthy, and surrounded by love. To anyone reading this who's struggling with toxic family dynamics, I want you to know that it's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to put your well-being and the well-being of those you love first. As for my dad, I haven't spoken to him since the trial, and I don't plan to. If he ever decides to truly apologize, I might consider opening the door to a conversation. But until then, Daisy and I are moving forward, one day at a time.